So today we're going to learn to acquire tools, resources, strategies for successfully completing the benchmarking survey. We'll learn how to analyze the data needed to complete the benchmarking survey, and we will assess the benefits of participating. Has anyone completed the survey before that's here today? Excellent. So we've got some newbies here. But today we're going to learn what you need to do to complete the survey. It's not as difficult as you might think, or if you think it's easy, great. We will help you. Our orthopedic survey is it's orthopedic specific. All practice sizes and settings are represented, and we have customized filters for all of the data that's presented, which makes it very easy to find your own practice within the data. One thing that we wanted to show you that's super helpful is that when you are looking at the data, you can filter down so specifically. So for instance, if you look at the very top number, the 597,000, that is just orthopedic surgeon compensation. But then if you drill down to the spine category, which is the second number, 793,000, you'll see a huge discrepancy there. Well, in the data, the spine surgeons make a lot more than just the average total orthopedic surgeon. So when a spine surgeon comes to you and says, hey, you know, I want to know what my average compensation is against the benchmark, you can drill down and see the actual spine surgeons in comparison. And then at the bottom, you see the average general orthopedic surgeon. Well, they're at 582,000, which is, again, different from spine. So when you drill down to the specifics, you'll see that there's a difference. And likewise, with the number of physicians within each practice, it varies. So when you're looking at a practice with only 1 to 5 physicians, you have 485,000 is your average compensation. But then when you go higher to 13 to 20, you have 567,000 as the average. And then with over 20 physicians, the average compensation jumps to 615,000. This is an example of what you can see in our benchmarking data. After you complete the survey, you have free access to all of this. And this is just one example of what you can see about the cost per patient visit. We have you can see year over year, the difference. You can see average. You can see your practice against the average. You can see the 25th percentile, the median, 75th, and the 90th. We also see the formula, which is how when you do complete the survey, you're given specific instructions of how to complete the data or how to put the data in. But this tells you now the formula. So it's, for instance, this one is the total overhead expenses from the income statement divided by new and return patient visits. There's also a tab at the bottom where you can drill down and see the actual numbers behind some of this, which is your cost per patient visit. Sometimes it's just a graph, and then you can drill down. This is a dashboard example that we have. It's a key ratios dashboard. Again, this is all given to you for free if you complete the survey. This one shows your patient percent AR, overhead by net collections, your staff cost per patient visit, net collection ratio, your surgical cases, square foot, staff per 1,000 visits, staff per 10,000 work RVUs, and the percent outsourced services by net collections. And you see all those filters at the top. You can drill down by state, by survey period, by region, practice size, revenue size. So all of these are invaluable when you're trying to compare yourself against others in the data set. And here are your another example of benchmarking results. This is staff cost, and then you have it as a by service line. But this is the staff cost by service line. So you've got therapy, you've got MRI, X-ray, DME, and general orthopedics. And then in this little arc here at the bottom right, you can see your percentile. And you can also click on any of these and drill down. So in the survey, we collect data on provider productivity, practice administrator compensation, employee salaries and FTE, expenses, and revenue. We also collect payer mix, accounts receivable, ancillary services, physician recruitment, and then there's a section for other. This is where I'll turn it over to Terry, who will talk to you about preparing for the survey.
Thank you, Beverly. And good morning. I see a few faces from yesterday, so I guess we did not scare you off when we did our first presentation on benchmarking. So Beverly's shown you the type of information you can get and some of the benefits of the survey. Now I'm going to kind of show you how you go about preparing for it, where you pull the information from, and give you some helpful tips. Just a few things I'll touch on that Beverly went over. You know, some of those graphs, it's funny because there's things I never thought of looking at my staff cost as a percent of revenue. Most people go, well, I have 5 doctors, you should have 4 employees per doctor. Well, orthopedics doesn't work like that. Orthopedics, you've got x-ray, if you've got PT, you've got MRI. I mean, I'm up close to 7 employees per doctor, but if you're using employees to generate revenue, you know, my staff percentage of cost of revenue is under 30%. So it's funny how some numbers in the survey will tell you one thing, that maybe you have too many employees if you listen to other people, but when you really get down and look at some of the data that's available, that's not necessarily the case. So the information you're going to need, a lot of it's going to come from your EMR, your practice management system, you know, your provider details, your production, your payer mix, your AR and aging. A lot of this you've probably already pulled. You probably did it for your year-end reporting. I do it. I put it in a folder because I know I'm going to need it for my benchmarking, and I just put it aside until the survey is released so I can go in and do it. You know, when you talk about provider details, you're going to need, you know, generally you put in by initials just so you can identify them as you're doing the survey. You'll put in their MPI, years they've been in the practice. That's something we've added lately because it is a lot different comparing compensation for a doctor that's been in the practice 5 years versus 15 years. So we felt it was important when people start looking at average salaries and things like that, there's a big difference in that. So years with the practice, specialty, because you can drill down by their subspecialty to get better information for them. And then the production by provider, that's going to come down to surgical cases, you know, inpatient, outpatient, ASC, and then new patient visits and total visits. Now there's been, I know I had a discussion with someone at dinner last night. There's some limitations because I see a patient in January, they come back in June for a different problem. Their EMR will not let them have a patient type different problem, and they can't put them in as a new patient because of coding. So there are some limitations there. So you may have to kind of work around that to get a true number on your number of visits. But, you know, surgery follow-ups, all of that plays into your production. We look at injections that your doctor does, and other production things you look at, x-ray numbers and things like that. Your payer mix details, I mean, I think we all know how to look at our payer mix. You go in on the survey, it's broken down to Medicare, commercial, workers' comp, and other government programs. You know, your VA, your Medicaid. I think Medicaid actually is separate. And then your other government programs, your TRICARE, maybe VA, things like that. And your AR aging, of course, we all know you just enter the information from the end of the year into the AR report. So those are all reports we're all very familiar with. We all look at them all the time. So you should have pretty easy access to that. You know, provider compensation can be a little bit more difficult. You know, some of this, because if you don't know what's going on, if you're in a huge organization like Bev, where you've got a human resource department that's handling all that, you may have to call them, get some information. For me, it's easy because, you know, I pass out the W-2s, I do the 401k contribution and all that, so I have access to that. But you'll need their provider compensation from both their W-2 and their K-1s. If you're in an S Corp or something like that where you get a K-1, you know, you need to include that compensation. If you have earnings from an ASC and you have access to those, if you can enter those, and also call pay. If you get paid for call, there's a spot to enter that. And real estate earnings. If your real estate like ours is in a separate entity, it's wholly owned by the doctors, but it's a separate entity and they get revenue for that. That needs to be added as well. But that would all come from a K-1 or a W-2. And then recruitment data. If you've been recruiting physicians in the last few years or in the last year, did you get hospital help? Did you give them a moving allowance, things like that? Partnership track, how long does it take for them to become a partner, and things like that on the recruitment details. Payroll accounts, payable, and general ledger. That's where you're going to get your P&L, is where most of your expense information is going to come from. Your revenue is going to come, obviously, most of it's going to come out of your EMR, your production. Practice administrator and senior executive compensation. I'm assuming you probably have that broken out separately on your P&L. Everyone's P&L is going to be different. Mine is about 10 pages long. I'm sure if Bev looks at hers, it's probably 100 pages long. So it all depends how your P&L is set up, but that's where that's going to come from. Employee is an employee FTE and their compensation. And there's a formula in the survey, if you have a part-time employee, how to figure out, if they're 0.25, 0.4, 0.5 or whatever, so we can get a kind of accurate accounting when we start talking about salaries. And non-staff expenses, obviously that's going to be IT and those sort of things that play into it, and they're all broken down. We'll talk about that. Building and equipment information. Again, what do you pay for rent? What do you pay for janitorial? What do you pay for utilities and that sort of stuff? Because, we're looking at square footage and how much you generate per square foot. So that's important there. And then your individual ancillary data, if you have PT, if you have MRI, if your surgery center is part of your practice and it's part of your practice revenue flow, depending at our practice, our PAs are considered ancillary income because they work for the practice and not an individual doctor. So they go under ancillary. Your DME, X-ray is broken out separately as well. So your ancillary data. And again, all of this is probably stuff you have in reports that you've already pulled for your end of the year reporting. You'll need to know when we start talking about your staff assignments, you obviously need to know what role everybody plays in the organization. When you start getting into the survey, the salary portion where you're listing people by position, just my trick on that, I take my stack of W-2s. Again, I don't have 150 employees. I only have 80. And I say, okay, this person's MA, this person's front desk, this person's in PT, and I just do it like that. And then I go through department by department and enter my information there. You may have an HR manager that can help you with that, or you may be the HR manager and be doing that. For some of us, all four of those things on the left, that's one person. For other people, it's not. So again, you may have to ask for help within your organization from different departments to get all the information you need. And then again, it talks over here about how we break out, how you determine what an FTE is and how to figure that. It takes some time. Like I said, told you all yesterday, I've just completed mine for 2022. Took me about 6 hours. I didn't do it all at once. I broke it up over about 2 weeks time. So, take some time. Hopefully you've already pulled the reports. A lot of them, you have the W-2s, you have the K1. You may have to wait for those from your accountant if he's slow like mine is, before you can start. But then it takes time. Your P&L, you may have to go through and analyze, pull stuff that's in one cost center that maybe shouldn't be in another one. That's my case because the P&L was set up before me, and I just haven't had the time or the desire to go in and start changing and moving accounts to different places. And then entering into the survey. We had a question yesterday about, it's so, if you do the online version, it's so long, you got to enter the doctors. The good thing is once you've completed it, if you go back next year, it's going to pull your doctor information forward, and you can just click on to add a new one. Or if someone's left the practice, you can just click the delete. Obviously, the data is going to have to be entered, but the things like the MPI and all that are going to be in there already. It's going to pull automatically. It's got instructions, just like you saw at the bottom of the graphs where it told you the formulas that are used. Every part of the survey, if you do the online version, has instructions. It tells you, what they're looking for with this calculation. Where does the data come from? So that's built into the survey. We have a survey guide that you can get from AAOE. And also, if you're in the survey, you can click on it. There's, Did we do handouts, Vicky? Okay, there's some handouts in the app that are some tricks and cheats on the survey. And then it talks about what we've talked about, the data sources and reports, and a survey checklist. So those are all good tools. There's also a chat. You know, you can send a question to AAOE, and they'll get you in touch. If the AOE, someone there can't answer your question, they'll get in touch with one of the board members. And we do calls with people all the time who have a question about the survey. So either by email or by phone. Our AAOE Chief Integration Officer, that is Vicky back there that I just spoke to. She's the person, if you call AAOE with the question about the benchmarking survey, she will be your first point of contact, and then she would get you in touch with someone from the Data Analytics Council. There's, I think, 7 members currently. Beverly will be taking over as the board chairperson after this meeting. I'll still be on the council, but I'm giving up the chair position. And we have a learning center, and we do webinars throughout the year on how to complete the survey and how to do things. So we're really trying to get the participation up, because the data is only as good as the number of practices we have in it. You know, if 10 practices participate, that's not going to give us very valid or usable data. You know, our high was 178 a few years ago, and then COVID and everything. So we've been building back up. And last year we were at 101. Vicky's goal is for 300, and I hope we can get there soon. So it's important. So now we're just section details, and I'm going to turn that over to Beverly. Sure. I would say years practicing orthopedics, because if you bring in a guy with 10 years experience, you're probably not paying him or expecting him to perform like a guy in his second year.
For us, I don't ever know how long my providers have been in practice. I've never met most of them. So I don't usually fill that out because I have no idea. So there, you know, some of the fields are required, but you don't have to fill out all of the fields if you just don't know or can't find the data. All right, so in the first section, we're going to talk about the provider productivity and compensation. We look at anyone that's billable. So if you've got NPs or, you know, you've got the PTs and OTs, you've got, we look at the patient visits, and we look at IMEs. IMEs are super important to orthopedic practices. So we look at your volume of IMEs. We look at injections. And now we're collecting all injections. Previously it was just viscos, but now we're collecting all injections. We look at the surgical cases, and we look at it versus ASC versus hospital-based. We look at your work RVUs, collections, compensation, and under compensation, we split that up for the physicians into practice and real estate hospital ASC compensation. For the practice administrators, we look at different metrics like the base, the bonus. We look at different benefits. We look at the demographics as far as their experience, their education, and also their credentials. For the general employee data, we look at the revenue generating staff, we look at clinical support staff, patient care, business operations, and we also look at the taxes and the benefits of each. So you'll need to be able to separate all of your employees into different categories in this way. We have in our system a way where I can put a code in the payroll system, and that helps me when I pivot all of the data to be able to group it in that way with the FTEs. For non-staff expenses, we look at all the physician expenses. We look at facility, medical, tech, marketing, office, your professional and outsourced services, and we look at insurance and officer compensation. In the revenue area, we split out direct patient revenue versus other revenue, like from, you know, rentals and stuff like that. In the payer mix, we look at your gross charges, your contractual adjustments, and we tell you what types of adjustments are contractual versus not, because I know each system is different. Some systems will more clearly tell you what's a contractual adjustment versus not, but we help you break that down. And then we also show the net charges and the net collections. In the accounts receivable area, we split it into those general buckets. And ancillary services. So we split out X-ray, MRI, CT, DEXA, and then we also split out the therapy. PT and OT are separate, or you can combine them. We do DME, orthotics, and prosthetics. I don't know if any of you are part of the Ortho Forum or Ortho Connect, but they do not split out X-ray, but we do here for the Ortho Forum. For AAOE. Yeah. Total. Physician recruitment. We look at the new physicians that started. So we ask you if you hired any new physicians this year, what their starting salary, bonus, any moving expenses or hospital assistance. We ask about that. And that, again, is very helpful. Like for us, when we hire new physicians, we go into these benchmarks and we say, okay, so what's the going rate for the new physicians? In the other section, we look at square footage, call data, and ASCs, administrative physicians' end of career data, databases and system information like what EMR you're on, and government affairs data. And here, this is just a summary, I guess, of what I just talked about. Yes. And now I'll move it on to Terry.
Before we go into the different ways you can participate, does anyone have any questions on what we've looked at so far? Okay. So a couple of years ago, we kind of broke the survey up and we broke it into 4 tiers because some people just said, it's too long. Some of it doesn't pertain to me. It's too much for me to do. So we broke it into 4 different tiers. You can complete 1 tier. You can complete all 4. We've told people, if you're really unsure about it, just do 1 tier to start with the first year so we get some data going. And then hopefully, as you see the ease of it and the information you can get, you'd be willing to go on and do more. So, and what you do is you'll be given an option when you start the survey, what tiers you want to do. And you can go back if you get through with 3 tiers and you say, I'd like to do that extra 4th tier, you can go back at the beginning and click on that 4th one. So tier 1 is going to be your core metrics. That's your provider compensation and productivity. We all know our doctors like to get paid. How do they get paid? They get paid on production. So those obviously are very important. Number 2, I'm sure, is important to everyone in this room, and that's practice administrator compensation. It is invaluable to me, and I've used it many times to be able to go into my board meeting when it's time for a raise and be able to show them data. I shared with the group yesterday, when I went in this year, they said, because believe it or not, my doctors, it's only 5, but they don't know how much I make. They see they see administrator as a line item on the P&L. And they said, so what all is in that? So I gave them a list of what all was included in my compensation package. And I showed them the AAOE data from 2021 for a practice my size. And then they said, okay, well, that looks pretty good. And then I showed them their data. And, when every doctor is in the 90th percentile for compensation and the 25th percentile for overhead, that means we're doing pretty well. And so that worked out really well for me. Of course, the flip side of that is if you show them numbers that aren't so good, they might say we're paying you too much. But hopefully that doesn't happen. So practice administrator compensation, obviously very important. Revenue, of course, that's what drives the compensation. How efficient you are in getting that revenue in the door and how efficiently you're using staff to produce that revenue, whether it be mid-levels or ancillaries or things like that. Of course, revenue is what makes it go. Physician expenses, every practice is set up differently. Some practices, mine has 2 different retirement plans, a 401k and a cash balance for the doctors. There's some I know that have more than that. So at my practice, physician expense is every dollar that benefits a physician directly. That's their payroll tax, everything gets put in that bucket as a physician expense. Car allowance, health insurance, liability insurance, things like that. So every direct expense to a physician. And then total non-physician expenses, obviously that's everything else. That's after you've got the doctors, all the other departments fall in the non-physician expenses. Tier 2, your employee expense and metrics. Obviously, this is very important. We've worked really hard at AAOE the last couple of years trying to get a good salary survey for general employees because we really haven't had that. A lot of people have asked for it. We had some good leverage on it, then COVID hit, and it kind of, so we're really trying to get that because you can go to MGMA and get salary data, but a lot of that, like we talked about yesterday, a lot of MGMA is hospital-based or large health system-based, like a UAB or an Emory or someone like that. And that's going to be a little different than someone in private practice. So we really want to get the salary survey going. You know, it's going to talk about your FTEs, your employee salaries, their expenses, you know, health insurance, life insurance, disability, 401k contribution. It asks for all that. Ancillary services, you know, your revenue and your costs there. And then, of course, your accounts receivable and payable mix come into the expense metrics. The remaining metrics in Tier 3, that's when we get into some of the stuff, you know, that's important to probably bigger practices. I mean, if you're a smaller practice, your square footage is your square footage. But when you're a big practice, you want to make sure real estate's expensive and you want to make sure that you're utilizing the square footage the best you can. Very early in my career, someone told me the easiest way to tank your overhead is to waste money and overspend on real estate. So that's very important to a lot of practices to be able to look at square footage, what you're generating per square foot in your facility. Call data, that's been a big, you know, on the listserv that comes up about every 6 months. You know, what are people getting paid for call? You know, what does that look like? So it's good to have that information so you can negotiate with your hospital. And we've used it. We said, you know, we got a bump in our call pay recently. We said, this is what the national average is. So we only got a bump for weekends and holidays, but at least it was a bump. Physician recruitment, important. A lot of us recruiting physicians. We know there's a shortage of orthopedics. And so recruiting, you got to be competitive. If you want to be able to recruit somebody, you better know what other people are offering, what other people are doing to get those physicians from you. And there's some additional data that has to do with, you know, your EMR, what you're using, your accounting software. Those are just general questions that it's just good to know. Are you participating in MIPS or some other kind of quality payment arrangement, some sort of bundling arrangement, something like that? So, and then Tier 4 is the one we're really pushing hard, and that's the salary survey. We really would like to get some valid data for practices so that you can go in and look by your state or your region. Because I was in a group discussion 2 days ago, and if there's anyone from Florida in here, I'm sorry, but I'm glad I'm not an administrator in Florida with the numbers they were throwing out of what they're having to pay some people. And they're paying a starting front desk person more than I'm paying an MA that's been in my practice 20 years. So, but it's good to know that sort of stuff so you kind of know where you're at. But you know, demographics of them, you know, basically what they do, what's their position. Are they full-time, part-time? Their salary and wages, bonus compensation if they get it, you know, benefits offered and the cost. You know, how much do you pay for your employees' health insurance? Some people still pay 100%. Some people I heard the other day paying as low as 60%. So that's good to know because we all know staff's getting harder to find. So we're competing for staff just like we're competing for doctors. So it'd be nice to know what other people are offering. Retirement plan contributions, and do you pay for professional development, uniform allowance, things like that. So we ask for all of that. Your submission options. There's the online option that I've talked about where it kind of walks you through step by step. It's got all the tips. You can click on, you know, boxes to the side to help you. It'll explain each section to you, what's in the calculation, what we're looking for. There's an Excel version some people prefer. They can just, you know, maybe they have it set up where they can just download, export it directly, some of the information. If you want that version, you contact AAOE and they can send you the link for the online version. And then there's a hybrid that's online Excel. Is that the Ortho Forum, Vicki? Okay, I'm sorry. All right. So that, and then like we said, if you're in Ortho Forum or Ortho Connect, you can just send the exact same survey And the company we use to do the survey has mapped it to that information would pull directly in. And or you can send it directly via email to data@AAOE.net, which would again go to Vicky. So, but those are the submissions, sir. I personally do the online survey. For me, it's just easy. It keeps me on track, and sometimes in Excel things I get lost and things like that, but it keeps you going. And in the online version, you can jump from section to section, go through as long until you hit that finish and submit button. You can jump around and do sections. If you have 30 minutes, you can say, I can do this section real quick and knock it out. So the survey timeline. Survey was available April 1st. Hopefully you got an email from AAOE telling you if you would like to participate to click on the link, and they would get you set up. The deadline is June 30th, 2023. We sometimes in the past we have had to extend that because like we talked about yesterday, we'll see that a practice is 80% completed, and we're trying to encourage them to get over so we can get more data in. And then, but it's important that you get it in soon because that allows us to have it out. We try to have it out by October 1st. And that gives us several months to for all the data to be analyzed, all the charts and the graphs to be populated, and then we as a council go over them and make sure that the data looks right, make sure we don't see anything that's any outliers or anything like that. So again, that's why it's so important to try and meet the deadline so we can get the information out as soon as possible. Because that if you get it in October, that can help you for budgeting. If your fiscal year runs January to December, that can help you for some of your budgeting for the next year. This year, we've added, we've done incentives in the past, but they've always kind of been at the end to kind of get people across the finish line. We've added some incentives this year from AAOE. I'd like to thank Vicky and the board of directors for that, for seeing the importance of benchmarking. So you can see if you get it submitted by May 15th, you get free access to the results, which anyone who completes the survey gets access to the results, but you get free access to the results. You get a consultation with Doctors Management. I don't know if any of you are familiar with them. If any of you went to the session yesterday on compliance with Sean Weiss, who's tremendous. He's with Doctors Management. And you get a free consultation with them where they'll go in and look at your survey and go over stuff with you. They're a great company. My practice uses them a little bit. So, but that is one of the perks. And you get a free conference registration next year for Chicago and a $100 gift card. So that's a tremendous value add for your practice if they can save on the registration cost for next year. And then if you submit by June 15th, you'll get free access to the results, of course, still get a consultation with Doctors Management, and then you get one free conference registration, so you just don't get the gift card. And then if you submit by July 15th, you get free access to the benchmarking results, and you get the free consultation with Doctors Management. So some good incentives in there to encourage people to participate. And again, I appreciate the board of directors seeing the need for benchmarking and agreeing to allow these incentives. If you're planning to participate, you can scan that code. I'll step out of the way because I didn't realize it had a little dinosaur in it, Vicky. And now I think I'm going to turn it over to Beverly.
So I was just curious if anyone has had any concerns about starting the survey. You've been thinking about it for a while, but you're just hung up on one thing, or you're just worried about something. Is there anything, that you're concerned about, or do you all feel like, yes, I can do this. I'm going to do it this year. Time. Okay. Well, Terry says it's 6 hours. I have a team that works on it with me. I've never added up their hours, but ours is significantly more. But we have processes in place. I have mappings for my income statement. I have about 2,300 rows in my income statement, and that I've already mapped to MGMA. We do MGMA. We map it to MGMA Orthoforum. So we already have that mapped. So each year I just look for new accounts and I map those. So the process is difficult the first year, but it does get easier once you have the process in place. What are the sizes of your practices? Yeah.
One thing I'll say on that regarding the time commitment. You know, it's going to take you some time up front, but 3 weeks from now, when the doctor comes in and says, you know, what's my compensation compared to others? You know, what's my surgery volume compared to others? The amount of time that you're going to spend down the road looking up things for doctors who are going to come in and ask. And then not only just are you going to have to look up and try to find the data, then you're going to have to go and get your data and put it in. You know, the survey puts out all your data in there, and you can go right online, right to your page, click on the report, and it's going to show you your data. It'll show, if you've done it multiple years, it's going to show you the last several years of where your data is. And so the amount of time you're going to save down the road looking up things. And, you know, I've had several new doctors, young doctors join my practice. And if any of you have, you probably know they're a little more into the data than some of your older guys who all they cared about was, you know, what's their overhead percentage and what's their compensation, you know, and how many employees you have per physician. Most certainly. I see Vicki shaking her head. That is something we definitely will take back to the council at our next meeting. You know, like I said, we do offer the checklist and everything online, and the availability to reach out and get, you know, a board member on the phone who can go over certain sections with you, but we certainly can look into that.
Yeah, and on the board here, we have, we represent many different EMRs. So like if you have, for instance, Athena, we have Athena. So if, you know, if you wanted to know like what reports I run, I can tell you that, and that, you know, along with the survey checklist, you know, I can help you with stuff like that too.
And the council also runs a gamut of all different sizes from, I think we have one who's maybe a solo, all the way up to, you know, large groups like Beverly's.
Yes.
Well, you know, one thing on that, you know, like the ratios and everything, obviously you're not going to need to figure your net collection. You're just going to need the information, and it tells you, you know, each entry on the survey tells you what it's looking for. And so it'll tell you, you know, put in your physician revenue minus x-ray and any DME that you're going to record somewhere else. So it's very specific and very detailed to try and walk you through it. Because that was a concern we had is, you know, everybody figures overhead, you know, differently. When in reality, if you're on Eat What You Kill, your overhead's 100% because you're at the end of the year, you're dispersing everything that's left. But so that was a big thing for us, you know, so that's why there's going to be a lot of variation within, says I'm on Phoenix Ortho, which is kind of a dinosaur in the ortho world, but we've been on it, you know, for almost 15 years. So no EMR, no two EMRs are going to be the same, despite what they intended with meaningful use. They're not going to operate like they could communicate seamlessly. But that's why we have those steps and have the availability for people to talk, and we can help you get through it. I mean, and I'll be honest, I've been on this council 7 years, and there's still sometimes I'll look at stuff and I have to go back and look at the notes because I can't remember exactly what we're looking for. But again, because of the variabilities in different systems, we've tried to account for that by, you know, being very specific in what each calculation requires.